description is something that really caught my eye as I was reading through, and description is probably one of the most difficult topics I think to discuss. But if anybody can discuss it, I think it would be you. And does that sound good for you?
Well,
Um,
it sounds certainly complimentary, but yeah, um, it
Great.
it it ca- it is. There's things that are hard for writers. I'll spend on a plot, much more time on a plot. Working it out both from the um, detective's point of view and the killer's point of view, um, just so it seems whole, and it seems this could have happened. You don't want somebody, clapping their palm to their forehead and saying, "Oh, please." Um, so that's hard for me, and I could see where description can be hard. I'll tell you what I do. I do two things. One, I see it inside my head. Um, I think when um, I first began writing fiction, um, and
I was going to say all the way back to 17 magazine, or
well, all the way back to the 19th century. Um, yeah, I had been at 17 magazine, and I did some political speech writing. Um, and but I got tired of adolescence, and I got tired of all the politicians in New York wanting to sound like JFK. So um, uh, when I started writing fiction, I saw most of it in my head because I began with the old write about what you know. Um, and what I knew was when I finally got the sense, hey, I think I can do this. My and I was reading far too many mysteries that were healthy for me. And I knew my investigator was going to be a Long Island housewife, and um, that the I just had to decide, who to kill. And I had just had some gum surgery, so obviously a periodontist came to mind. And I I saw them. I saw the terrain she covered. I mean, I had a little office next to the our laundry room. Um, and then unfortunately we had a loud spin cycle, which was kind of distracting. But that was how I wrote my descriptions, by seeing it in my head. Now, okay, I'm downstairs. Um, I'm looking, and the first was done on a typewriter. So I'm looking at the typewriter, and I said, "Hey, there's nothing here." What happens though is when you start writing, once you get a vision of what, you go inside, and it's really not in your brain, but you kind of go to a different universe. It's like if you ever watch Fringe on TV, it's a parallel universe. I mean, it's all the rage now, but um, and that's it. It was very much like the town on Long Island I live in. Um, Her background was vaguely similar to mine, not that much, and her husband was kind of a lout, just full of himself, and which, my husband says, how could you? Um, but um, I saw them. in this parallel universe. It was as if I was there, not even watching a movie, but watching them. But the more I wrote, the more I found that it's also helpful to look at ideas. So in Bad Seymour Brown, she's this college professor, really a nice woman, um, teaches film, and her area of specialization are the big Hollywood, the studio films. So when she was 5, her parents were murdered. It was an arson murder, and she was lucky enough to be able to jump out of the window. So, and it my and Corey, who's, you know, my detective, former FBI agent, is called on not by herself, but through her dad, who's a retired NYPD detective. And he was the detective who 20 years earlier interviewed this little girl, and they kept up a kind of birthday card, Christmas card relationship. Um, and so I was from there were so many things. There were lots of characters. Um, Sometimes what I'll do is the internet is, as we both know, is the blessing and the curse. Um, but when it's a blessing, you go and you can type in, I don't know, 45-year-old men, American, um, whatever, red hair. And you'll get, yeah, click on images. You get hundreds of pictures of redheaded men in their 40s. And then you just and what I do is I sometimes, not for my major characters who they're already settled in the universe next door. Um, but this helps me envision the style, the facial structure, whatever it is, it gives me a handle. The same thing with um, uh, the professor's house. Her name is April. April teaches at Rutgers University, which is in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And um, her father was a money launderer for the mob and left her fairly well fixed. And so she's bought herself a nice small Victorian house right outside of New Brunswick. And I had a great time. Um, it was during COVID. So, nobody was holding a gun to my head and saying, rush. Uh, I had the leisure to look at real estate in New Brunswick, and I found the house that I knew she should live in. And that's simply it. And the house, the way her house, because she's now being threatened. Someone is trying to kill April 20 years after, and the local cops are convinced it has nothing to do with her parents' murder, but that's why she calls Corey's dad and Corey into it. Um,
Well,
it's
the
it's yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say and it's not just you were talking about visualizing the thing in your work. You use all the senses in there as well.
Oh yeah, because when you're in when you're really writing and psychology, concentrating. I mean, we were having work done um, on the house once, and they were trying to do something in the basement. Forget what it was, but there was a jackhammer going, and I was upstairs working. It was when my kids were really young, and so it was a limited amount of time to write. I was so focused that I didn't um I didn't hear the jackhammer until, I don't know, the dog put her nose on, her snout on my knee and said, "What is this?" "What is
You'd
this?"
actually
And then I heard it.
you actually transcended to the other universe.
Exactly. And the weird thing is, normally, normally I have ADD, ADHD, whatever they call it, but I didn't know that then. I didn't know there was a name for it. I just thought, this is how I am. I go from, but people with ADHD can't use that as an excuse not to write because you hyper focus. But the point is, I can't say anyone can write. They can't, but you don't know whether or not you can. You have no idea. I mean, listen, it's always better in your head than on the page as far as writing goes. Um, but you don't know whether you could do it. And it took me a long time to get up the courage because, who am I? I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't, I went to a good city college, Queens College. But like Corey, I gave her my alma mater. And I, and I live on Long Island. And actually, one of my first rejections of my first novel, Compromising Positions, was someone said, nobody wants to read about a Long Island housewife. And I say, well, I've written lots of different types of books, not just this is now finally after 45 years, I decided to write a series. I'm not exactly whimsical, but I I kn- I sensed that the only way I could do it was by doing it, by sitting down. I had the discipline that my my younger kid, who was then 3, was off to preschool for 3 hours a day, and that was it. And I decided, there's no medical emergency that requires fresh laundry. And there's no need, even if it is blueberry season, to make a pie during these 3 hours, whatever it was, or to read some book. Or I just had to do this. And so
So let
I'm
me,
jumping between
yeah,
that book and
yeah.
the
Let me ask,
past,
how,
but
in terms of the description, how do you know what is too much, what's too little, what's the litmus?
oh, okay. That's a great question. In fact, you don't know at the beginning. Um, I always have to cut my books. Um, because I got so involved in um New Brunswick real estate and houses and the molding in Victorian houses and the carved wooden. I mean, it was as if I was writing for, you know,
Architectural
mi-
Digest or
except for architectural digest for the middle class. And it was um but better to write. And what the real test is, when I come back to this world and start start editing myself, what I do is if I'm debating, is do I need this? Does this further the feeling the reader gets in a room? Does it further the character of the person who put up the frame pictures of movie stars in her bathroom? And does it does it help establish anything to do that's necessary to the book? And a lot of times it does not, and it goes. It may be just the best description ever written for I don't know, crown molding, but it ain't gonna be mine.
But you give a great sense of place when you read the sections of the novel. You feel like you're there.
Mhm.
So you pick some details to include, some not to include. What's your
The
criteria for
details
that?
kind of pick the details. It's what it's what the character sees through through their eyes, his or her, whatever. Um, what the character would notice if I'm writing, say, when in my novel Red, White, and Blue, I had two main characters, and one was a newspaper reporter from New York. The other was an FBI agent who'd been born and raised in Wyoming. Um, and first of all, their backgrounds are completely different. They're going to notice different things. But if he's going after a someone involved in domestic terrorism, he's not going to be noticing the curtains unless he thinks the person is hiding behind them. Um, it's what's relevant to the character. It's what's relevant to the scene. You know, you set the scene a little bit, and you know the room. You know, it was one of these. I'm making this up. All white, um, all white living rooms that it felt like you were living inside a cotton ball. You know, you want to, and then you make reference to something else that's white in the room. That should I take off my shoes? Should I not? But it depends if Corey is in Bed Seymour Brown is um, expert in the martial art of Krav Maga. So um, if she's about to, you know, take somebody by their arm, twist it, and flip them over, um, there are things she's going to be noticing, whether it's the feel of the person's arm, that it's sweaty or that it's hairy or that it's thinner or heavier than more muscular than she thought, but she's not going to notice that the guy is wearing an Apple Watch.
Gotcha. The reading through the book, I kept thinking, man, she does a lot of research. Man, she does a lot of research. And then
I did.
I get to the acknowledgments, and then it says, I did a lot of research. So
Yes.
that's
Well,
got to help
part.
description.
Well, you know why it helps. First of all, you want to see that the writer, the narrator should know, in Corey's case, what she's talking about. Um, so if she's talking about DNA, if she's talking about um, practicing at a shooting range, um, if she's in the book before this, Takes One to Know One, um, she's she finds that she's after a professional hitman, and she scours an area to find the local shooting ranges where he might practice. But she's at home there. Um, so I wanted to see. I didn't want someone saying, "What are you talking about? There's no shooting range like that in the Bronx or wherever it was." Um, so I did that kind of thing. I go to the whether it's Field and Stream, NRA website, um, you know, I, s- coming from originally from Brooklyn, mm, I don't know that many people who shoot, but I do know some people who do, and I certainly have met enough people in law enforcement. So I can call them up and say, "Hey, what kind of a gun a would a woman with relatively small hands, if she's interested in accuracy, or what would she carry, and is it called a gun, and what's the difference between a gun and a revolver?" First of all, you get them talking about guns, and you listen to their language. You don't try to get every word, and you can record them if they're willing, but you get a sense of how they feel if they do like target practice. Again, this is not my wheelhouse, um, but it would be partially in her wheelhouse. Or she said, you know, she could, she didn't know even after Quantico whether she could hit the broadside of a barn door, but she felt she could at least hit the barn. Um, but she knows what her strengths are. She knows what her weaknesses are. Um, and, there's always, you know, we're blessed with having great public libraries. So, especially during COVID, but even without, um, do I, um, do I go to, what do you call it? Do I go to Brooklyn to find out she grew up in the Russian section of April. Her father was, as I said, a money launderer, an accountant, but they lived near Brighton Beach. They lived in a place in Brooklyn called Manhattan Beach. And I called the library. I said, I'm really interested in Manhattan Beach, Brighton Beach area, but not from now, but for 20 years ago. And the librarian, who was so nice and so, I mean, her job was to be helpful. And all I remember was her name was Lucy. Um, but I call her Saint Lucy because she gave me a wonderful, um, what do you call it? A wonderful list and couple of three websites of where I could access local newspapers from long ago that had been digitalized. So I was able to see that neighborhood as it was at that time the crime was committed. It's not that I want, again, it's not a question of, is there a shooting range in the Bronx? It's, I want to immerse myself in that. I want to feel that I know the neighborhood, and I can, you don't need 3 weeks to do it. You could do it in get a pretty good idea in 45 minutes of leafing through what the issues are, what um the ethnicity is, what people are saying in the neighborhood. And I did I did a lot of that. Part of it is um the geek in me who just loves getting into different things and different lives, and I'm very curious. But it also, I I get their vocabulary, I get what they were wearing, and suddenly it's part of me. That's why I always, from my first mystery novel through, when I did a couple of espionage novels, I got to talk to someone who's retired from CIA. I didn't get secrets. I mean, I got information about, some training with the FBI, uh, way back in the 90s. I got to visit the FBI. It only took 8 months to get a clearance, but I wasn't finished yet, so I had to be patient. Um, and it was it was a great experience that stays with you because you see the ones who are dedicated and passionate, and or at least give an honest day's work for their pay, whatever they are. It gives you a sense of who is there, and the more expert you can become, the more comfortable you are in that world.
Yeah, I've noticed the book moves along at a fast clip, and I noticed
Hmm.
distinctly that part of the usage of active verbs is very high on what you do. Is that intentional, or that's just something that
It
comes
just
from you?
happens. It just happens. I mean,
It
there
moves
are
the
so
story
many
forward.
things. Yeah, I guess it does, but I don't think, oh, let me think of an active verb. I, you know, it never occurred to me to think of an active verb.
Yeah. Does this
Um,
is Corey Geller going to appear in another novel then?
oh yes, I'm already writing it. I'm already on it, and it's when I started. Look, 45 years. I did mysteries. I did sagas. I did espionage novels. I did, just regular books about people's lives. Um, but I never wrote a series. Because I was afraid I would, after writing one successful mystery, that I would be stuck and I'd be writing, um, my character in compromising positions with Judith Singer. Judith Singer Goes Hawaiian in the 25th sequel. I didn't want that. I wanted to try things out. And so to be now, that I've long been in the career, I thought I would really like to do a series because I want to another family. I mean, I have a great family. I have a husband who's um still practicing law. He's gone from long ago, went from being a prosecutor to being a criminal defense lawyer, but I call him my house counsel. I get a lot of stuff from him. Um, I have children, I have grandchildren, but I'm ready for another family. And so it's not just a one book deal. So I made her as rich and as complicated and as believable as she could be. It's one thing to have a housewife detective, it's another to have someone who's lives in the suburbs, but who's a pro. And she's helped by her father, who was in the NYPD who has a different kind of experience.
Yeah, did if going back to your self-referenced 45 years ago, uh, what do you
Mhm.
wish you had known as a writer starting out that you can give advice to the readers here?
That that it's always hard, but it's not. I mean, you see movies about writers and they're thinking themselves stupid and they're, agonizing and the words won't, all of that. And that can be true. It could be terrible, or it could just be, ugh, I have to go to work today. Or it can be with great glee. It so depends on the writer. So I think that part of it is to view writing as a job, and your job isn't going to get done. It's forget getting paid. Your job is not going to get done unless you go to work regularly and you set up a schedule that works for you. I am still, all these years later, I have 5 grandkids. Um, I'm still um, on the same schedule. I started when my daughter, who now has a PhD in philosophy and 2 kids of her own, when she was in preschool. Same exact schedule. And I've been doing it for years. Do I
Can I
take vacations? Yeah.
can I ask what the schedule is?
The schedule is 9 o'clock. I'm at my typewriter. And then at or sorry, on my computer. Um and at 12, between 12 and 1, I quit. I mean, I used to set an alarm to get her off the school bus. I don't have to do that. But 12:01, I take a break, I go outside, I'll, do normal people things. Work, play in the garden, dig up dirt, read a book, whatever I'm gonna do. Shop for shoes. But then, um, in the afternoon, when said child was taking a nap, um, I um, I go over the stuff, and I actually have to print it out um, to mark it up. I'm still of that school, but otherwise, I feel technology has helped, and you could use it. There are some great writers like Mary Gordon who write on a pad and with pad and pencil or pen. Um, Fine, it works. It's whatever works for you. It's completely idiosyncratic. And my recipe for chicken soup is not going to be the same as yours. No two people make it alike. No two people make love alike. Okay. But that's what makes you human.